An 8-year-old girl stepped out of her home just to go play and then vanished without a trace. After 10 days of searching, the truth slowly came to light in a way that left even seasoned investigators shaken into silence. The young girl had fallen into a dangerous situation and suffered severe injuries before being discovered inside a suitcase in a local irrigation pond.
The search for a little girl missing in California is now a hunt for a killer. The body of 8-year-old Sandra Cantu was found hidden not far from her hometown.
Ever since she disappeared, volunteers in Tracy had been determined to find her. Now, the city's police chief is determined to find her killer.
What makes this case even more haunting is that it was not the work of a stranger. So what really happened during that short window of time? In a quiet corner of the city of Tracy, California, there was an 8-year-old girl named Sandra Cantu, someone anyone who met her would find hard to forget. She was raised in the care of her mother, Maria Chavez, alongside her 3 siblings, Miranda, Simone, and Thomas. Although her parents no longer lived together, her father, Daniel Cantu, was still present in his own way, staying in touch and remaining closely connected with his children every day. In her family's eyes, Sandra was a source of energy that never ran out. She loved helping her mother in the kitchen, enjoyed going out to the garden with her grandparents, and especially loved staying active and dancing. For Sandra, every morning going to school was a joy, and every afternoon coming home meant a new story to tell. She was innocent, carefree, and brought a sense of warmth to everyone around her. March 27th, 2009 began like any other ordinary day in Tracy. After school, at a little past 2 p.m., Sandra came home with her usual excitement, ready to tell her family about her day. But just minutes later, she set her backpack down and quickly ran outside when she saw her brother had just arrived as well. The family lived in Orchard Estates, a small community where kids often gathered to play near the nearby park. And for Sandra, being outside was always more appealing than staying in. Maria was used to that, so like every other day, she allowed her daughter to go out and planned to call her back in when dinner was ready. Before leaving, Sandra changed into her favorite Hello Kitty shirt, put on black leggings, hugged her mother, and ran outside. No one could have imagined it would be the last time they saw her so full of joy. A few hours later, when dinner was ready, Maria asked Thomas to call the kids home. Miranda came back right away, but Sandra did not. At first, and everyone assumed she was still playing somewhere nearby, maybe a game of hide and seek. Thomas kept searching for another 20 minutes, but found nothing. As the sky began to darken and the silence grew unsettling, Maria and Simone drove around the neighborhood asking neighbors, but no one had seen Sandra for hours. And by around 7:30 p.m., that uneasy feeling had turned into something far more real: fear. Maria called 911 to report her missing, and from that moment on, what had been a normal afternoon turned into the beginning of a deeply haunting case.
Well, I have a missing daughter. Okay, how old is she? She's 8. When's the last time you saw her? Oh, it was about 3. She told me she was going over to this one girl to play, and she hasn't been home. And I went looking all over.
Because Sandra was so young, the case was immediately treated as an emergency. Detectives quickly deployed K9 units to track her scent from her clothing, hoping to determine the direction she had gone. The dogs led officers out of the Orchard Estates neighborhood and straight toward the main road, but the trail suddenly disappeared, as if everything had been cut off midway. Meanwhile, investigators spread out across the neighborhood, knocking on every door to ask for information, though in reality, they hardly needed a photo since Sandra was such a familiar face in this small community. Over the weekend of March 28th and March 29th, search efforts intensified, with K-9 units, mounted teams, off-road vehicles, and a helicopter from the California Highway Patrol all brought in to search for Cantu. A reward of $22,000 was offered for information in the case. The atmosphere quickly grew tense. Everyone was on edge. But despite the thorough search, no clear leads emerged.
For a missing 8-year-old Tracy girl, it continues this morning.
Investigators say Sandra Cantu walked away from her home at the Orchard Estates mobile home park in Tracy. KCRA3 Sharikina Shams live in Tracy, where the search continues right now.
Well, good morning. Behind me is the Orchard Estates mobile home park. You can see Tracy police are stationed out here, and we've watched this morning as they've stopped and questioned people driving out of the mobile home park to get their day started today. Now, this is part of the police investigation unfolding in front of us. There's also what the volunteers are doing, and there's been an emotional search for the little girl.
And I wish we didn't have to be here, and I wish she was at home with her family, and I hope if somebody has her, they bring her home. She needs to be home with her family and her friends and all these people that care, because we all care. That's why we're all here.
And that's the voice of just one of some estimated 300 volunteers looking for the girl over the weekend. 8-year-old Sandra Cantu is Hispanic, 4 feet tall, and weighs 45 pounds with brown hair and brown eyes. So far, what we know from that surveillance tape is that it shows little Sandra Cantu leaving the mobile home park about 4 p.m. and then returning and then walking away again. So the question, where did she walk to that last time that she was being seen on that tape, and where is she today is what everybody would like to know. The investigation out here continues. Police say if you know anything, you're urged to contact Tracy Police.
And one investigator noted that Orchard Estates was not as peaceful as it appeared, with a concerning number of individuals in the area having serious prior offenses, ranging from those previously involved in misconduct with children to an ice cream vendor whose behavior made neighbors uneasy to the point that they would often ask him to leave whenever he showed up. As detectives began examining every possible lead, Sandra's grandfather, Joe, offered to provide footage from a security camera he had recently installed after a prior burglary, and that footage turned out to be one of the most critical pieces of evidence. The camera captured Sandra leaving the house just as Maria had described, then returning, walking cheerfully across the street as if heading back home. But instead of stepping onto the porch, she suddenly changed direction and walked toward one of the exits of the neighborhood, then disappeared from view and was never seen again. This detail drew particular attention from investigators because Sandra had been told never to leave the neighborhood without an adult, and the fact that she willingly went in that direction suggested she may have been drawn by something familiar or someone she trusted. During the investigation, police also considered the possibility of Sandra's father, Daniel Cantu, being involved, as he and Maria had previously had disputes over finances and custody. However, Maria insisted he was not involved, and detectives later confirmed he had a clear alibi, though the media still focused heavily on him in the early days, forcing him to repeatedly speak out in front of reporters.
Tell us a little bit about what we were reporting today. This guy, Kyle, saying that you had gone to Mexico. Speak to that.
What would you like me to say about it?
Obviously, you're not in Mexico.
I'm right here in front of you. All I know is I received a call from my sister stating that my daughter was missing Friday, and this was on a Saturday. I rushed out here. I stood for a day, and I needed to get back for my job.
And I think the reason why it's important for us to do this interview is because if the attention is taken off of you, then the attention can be put on the real person, if there is a person that abducted Sandra, or the search, instead of these things that are kind of thwarting people.
It's like I told the detective, do everything you need to do your job to the best of your ability. So, do your job, do the best thing you can do. Thank you for all your prayers. I love you. If you can get to a phone, dial 911, babe. Call somebody, run, do anything you can do. But please try and get home.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Daniel lived separately in Tracy, and his co-workers confirmed that he had been at work throughout that entire weekend, allowing detectives to quickly rule out any possibility of his involvement. With that lead closed, all focus shifted back to finding Sandra. Within just 48 hours, investigators had gathered more than 700 leads that needed to be verified, reflecting the overwhelming level of concern from the community. In an atmosphere still filled with hope, officials stated that there were no signs suggesting the girl had met a tragic outcome, and reports from residents continued to pour in as people believed they had seen a child resembling Sandra in different areas. We've received reports from people all across California saying they've seen her, which certainly suggests she may still be alive. Statistics indicate she's likely still in Tracy, but if we get a report in Nevada or Southern California, wherever a tip comes in, we'll go there, one officer said, showing that the scope of the search was gradually expanding beyond the original area. But as each hour passed, the pressure continued to mount, and local resources were no longer enough to handle the scale of the search. Authorities requested support from the FBI's Child Abduction Response Team, a unit that specializes in serious child disappearance cases. In situations like this, those first critical hours are everything. But what made it even more difficult was that no one knew exactly when Sandra had left Orchard Estates, whether something had happened to her immediately after she walked out the door or if she had been outside playing for some time before anything went wrong. By this point, more than 200 officers from multiple agencies across the United States had been mobilized, turning this into one of the largest search efforts ever conducted in Northern California at the time. Crews worked nearly non-stop, to the point where the Tracy police chief had to order them to go home and rest because they were completely exhausted, yet still refused to leave the scene, afraid that stepping away for even a moment might mean missing something crucial. As the investigation moved into the following week, the entire Tracy community came together for a candlelight vigil. Amid whispered prayers and quiet tears, people were not only holding on to fragile hope, but also sharing a growing sense of dread. The once peaceful atmosphere of the Orchard Estates mobile home community had been replaced by suspicion, as parents no longer dared to let their children out of sight for even a second. At around 8:30 p.m., while investigators were still on the scene, an unexpected situation unfolded when a neighbor named Melissa Huckabee came rushing over in a state of panic, barely able to keep herself composed. She lived just a few houses away from Sandra's home and said she had just found a handwritten note lying on the ground next to the community mailboxes. So shaken by what was written on it, she said she dropped the note and immediately ran to the police. The message read, "Cantu locked in stolen suitcase thrown into water at Botti Road and Whitehall Road. Witness." The information immediately drew attention, but at the same time it made investigators feel that something was off, because the note had appeared under highly unusual circumstances, with spelling mistakes that seemed intentionally made to hide the writer's identity. That night was extremely windy. Most residents were gathered at the candlelight vigil and had already been confirmed to be there, while the area had also been under continuous patrol earlier, making it suspicious that the note had supposedly just been placed there right before Melissa found it. The question was whether someone had taken advantage of the moment when people were away to deliberately create a false lead. But before reaching any conclusion, investigators needed to verify Melissa's account, and the FBI quickly began interviewing her directly to to clarify everything that had happened. Melissa was not just a neighbor. She was also a Sunday school teacher at the church where her grandfather served as a pastor, a role that earned her the trust of many families in the neighborhood, including Sandra's. After a failed marriage a few years earlier and a recent breakup, she had moved back in with her grandparents along with her 5-year-old daughter. Sandra and her siblings would often go over to Melissa's house to play, and even though Sandra did not attend church, she was very familiar with Melissa, seeing her as a friendly figure in the neighborhood. During her interview with investigators, Melissa stated that when she found the note, she did not pay attention to whether anyone suspicious was nearby, nor did she notice anything unusual. Detectives later asked to search her vehicle, and Melissa agreed to cooperate. Inside the glove compartment, they found a note with several words that had been written and then crossed out, a detail that was immediately flagged. Although there was not yet enough evidence to draw any conclusions, police still sent the handwriting sample in for analysis as a precaution, then allowed Melissa to leave while continuing to focus on examining the original note that had been found. However, Melissa continued to provide investigators with a list of individuals she considered suspicious in the neighborhood, including a man who had shown signs of involvement in harmful behavior toward children, another who had kissed Sandra on the lips 2 years earlier at a local pool when she was only 6, and a father and son who were believed to have stored images of multiple young girls on their phones, including photos of Sandra. All of these individuals were brought in for questioning and cooperated with authorities. The man who had kissed Sandra admitted to his actions, but claimed it was an inappropriate display of affection and denied any involvement in her disappearance. As for the father and son, the discovery of images of children on their phones drew particular attention from investigators. Although they had no clear connection to the girls in those photos, both firmly insisted they knew nothing about what had happened to Sandra. Even so, detectives kept them on their radar. But at this point, all resources still had to remain focused on the primary direction of the investigation.
It's been a week since 8-year-old Sandra Cantu left home to play in California and never returned. Authorities in Tracy are tracking down hundreds of leads this morning and raising the reward for information on the girl.
Investigators are sifting through trash in the local landfill, searching nearby rivers, and reviewing surveillance video in hopes of finding 8-year-old Sandra Cantu.
They questioned me about a bunch of things.
Police have questioned Sandra's father, but Daniel Cantu, who's returned from Mexico, says he hasn't seen her in a year and is willing to take a lie detector test.
I could care less about, yes, I have no problems with any of it.
They've also spoken with this man, Frank Wohler, a neighbor who admits he kissed the second grader on the lips 2 years ago.
Impulse was just being friendly. I do some of my students also.
FBI agents and Tracy police have searched nearby homes and towed vehicles to test for evidence.
The quality of leads that have come in have led investigators to be pretty upbeat that we're going to have a conclusion of this case here shortly.
Sandra's image is everywhere in this small community.
Detectives began to look more closely into Melissa, as she was the only one actively providing information and seemed to have a detailed understanding of the people living in Orchard Estates. When speaking with neighbors, they received multiple accounts suggesting that Melissa often inserted herself into other people's affairs, sometimes even exaggerating or creating stories to draw attention. This raised the question of whether she was simply someone who craved attention, or if she was actually hiding something behind her unusual behavior. As they reviewed her background, investigators discovered that Melissa had struggled with various psychological issues, including anxiety and prolonged stress, and also had a prior history involving minor legal violations. Her personal life appeared unstable as well, fraught with financial difficulties and ongoing pressure over an extended period of time. When detectives attempted to contact her for further questioning, they were informed that Melissa had voluntarily admitted herself to a hospital following a health-related incident, and although her condition was not serious, she seemed unwilling to cooperate further at that time, a detail that only drew more attention to her potential role in the case. Police, along with search and rescue teams, quickly moved to the location mentioned in the note. The directions led them to an irrigation pond in a remote area, surrounded by water pipelines and waste runoff. The site was fairly large, stretching about 150 yards in length and nearly 30 yards in width, but the conditions made the search extremely difficult. The water was thick and murky, almost impossible to see through with the naked eye, with visibility completely compromised and the environment unsafe for deep access. The overwhelming stench and heavy layers of sludge made it nearly impossible to deploy equipment or conduct a direct search. Even so, teams carefully examined the surrounding area, but found no clear signs on the surface or along the banks. And if anything was beneath the water, the chances of detecting it at that point were extremely low. On April 6th, as the search continued under mounting tension and fading hope, Sandra's disappearance was no longer viewed in its initial light, but had shifted into a far more serious line of investigation. Detectives continued monitoring the irrigation pond, and one morning, as workers began draining the water, a black suitcase suddenly surfaced and became lodged in the mud near the bank. The suitcase was tightly locked and further secured with bindings, suggesting deliberate efforts to conceal what was inside. The moment it was pulled out, its weight alone made it almost impossible to ignore the fear that the worst had happened. Inside the suitcase was Sandra, still wearing her familiar Hello Kitty shirt and black leggings, with cuts on her body and a torn piece of fabric tied around her head. The condition of her body indicated that she had endured a severely dangerous situation. Forensic results later determined that the cause of her death was related to strangulation, and a sedative was found in her system. Authorities also identified signs of a serious assault involving an unidentified object, although no foreign DNA was recovered, and investigators believe the entire sequence of events took place within just a few hours after Sandra was last seen on camera.
We will be determining the person or persons responsible for this reprehensible act, and we will bring them to justice.
On the 10th day of searching for Sandra, investigators were called to an irrigation pond about 2 miles from the girl's home. Farm workers draining the pond had found something suspicious.
As the water began to flow, an object floated to the surface. They identified it as a black container.
Inside the bag, we located the body of Sandra Cantu.
The search for the second grader had been intense, with every passing day getting harder for her mother.
How are you holding up?
Not very good. I miss my baby. I miss my little girl.
Faced with clear signs of a serious assault, investigators quickly built a suspect profile pointing toward a male between the ages of 25 and 40, with a history related to abuse or possession of child exploitation material. They believed this was not a random act, but most likely carried out by someone Sandra knew and trusted, someone who likely lived in the area or had close ties to the Orchard Estates community. However, after reviewing all individuals under scrutiny, each of them was able to provide a solid alibi, causing the investigation to quickly reach a dead end. Investigators continued working with residents living near the pond, and one account quickly drew their attention. A man who lived right next to the canal recalled that on Friday afternoon, around the time Sandra disappeared, he had seen a dark purple two-tone SUV driving around the area, something that immediately stood out, since there was virtually no reason for anyone to stop in such a remote location. The color of the vehicle was distinctive and did not belong to any local resident, which made him uneasy enough to walk closer and see who was inside. But at that moment, the vehicle appeared to be empty. As he was observing, a woman suddenly emerged from the bushes and explained that she had only pulled over for personal reasons, then quickly got back into the SUV and drove away. The description matched Melissa Huckabee, and later camera footage confirmed that she was indeed the driver of that vehicle. When detectives reviewed surveillance footage from within Orchard Estates, they discovered that Melissa had left her parking spot directly across from Sandra's home at around 3:30 p.m., drove toward her own house, then continued on to her grandfather's church, before later being seen near the pond at approximately 5:30 p.m., forming a sequence of movements that investigators could not ignore. Although Melissa was still in the hospital and had been given time to rest, by this point, investigators no longer viewed her as just a witness, but had shifted to considering her the primary suspect. When she returned for questioning, they confronted her directly with the evidence they had gathered, but Melissa maintained her story, as insisting she did not know what had happened and that she had simply found the note and reported it to police. She claimed that at around 4 p.m., the time Sandra was last seen on camera, she had been at the church decorating a classroom and had not noticed anything unusual. However, when asked to verify her account, phone records revealed a critical detail. Melissa herself had called police to report that her suitcase had been taken from the front of her home, and she had even texted Maria saying, "Tell the police that something of mine was stolen today around 4 p.m. I don't know if that makes any difference." The suitcase later recovered matched the color and style of the one Melissa reported missing, a black Eddie Bauer suitcase. And the note she handed to police did not just mention a suitcase, but specifically stated a stolen suitcase. When all these details were put together, Melissa's version of events began to fall apart, because it would mean that a stranger had coincidentally taken her exact suitcase, used it to conceal Sandra in broad daylight without being seen, and then Melissa herself just happened to be the one who found the note connected to the entire incident. A chain of coincidences that investigators believed was nearly impossible. Detectives decided to place Melissa's phone under surveillance, and just 2 days after she was released from the hospital, they recorded a notable call in which Melissa contacted Maria to invite Miranda over for a sleepover. After returning home, Miranda shared that something did not feel right, as Melissa barely mentioned Sandra, and when she did, it was only in passing, while showing a particular interest in what the police had managed to uncover. These details gradually strengthened the suspicions surrounding Melissa, even though most of the evidence remained circumstantial. Not long after, another neighbor came forward with additional information, stating that shortly before Sandra disappeared, Melissa had taken a young girl from the neighborhood out without informing the child's family. When the girl returned, her condition raised concern, prompting her family to seek medical evaluation, which later revealed the presence of a sedative from the benzodiazepines group in her system, the same type of substance found in Sandra's case. Melissa denied any involvement in that incident, and no formal charges were filed at the time. But as suspicions continued to build, she chose to speak with the media in an effort to explain and defend her version of events.
And the only reason that the police are over here and over at the church so much is because Sandra was my daughter's best friend and came over here almost every day to play with my daughter. And another thing is the suitcase. That was my suitcase. It was stolen out from in front of my house. In order to make a report, it was over $200. I had to go online and make a report, and I do not have access to the internet.
So do you believe your missing suitcase was the same suitcase that Sandra was found in?
I do not know. From what I can see on TV, it does not look like my suitcase.
The police have not disclosed any information as to whether or not it is my suitcase.
There was a situation where you and your daughter were out with another kid, and then what happened there? There was someone accused you of something?
Oh, I had taken my daughter and one of her friends to the park, which I had done for the third time that week. The mother was, I guess, at work, and the grandmother had told the little girl that she could go to the park, which she does all the time. And when the mother came home, she didn't know where she was. I'd given the mother my phone number, used my cell phone number in case there was anything to happen. Everything was fine. I brought her back. Police were called out at the time, and I was then called by my grandparents because her mother did not know that she was in a scene. That she was with me.
After the details about the sedative became clear, police obtained search warrants for Melissa's residence as well as her grandfather's church, and what they found began to connect all the previously scattered pieces. Inside the mobile home, they discovered a notebook with paper matching the same type as the note Melissa claimed to have found, and the handwriting shared identical characteristics, nearly impossible to mistake. Forensic analysis of the note found in her vehicle also revealed that the crossed-out words included Botti Road, Whitehall Road, and water, matching the contents of the mysterious message. In addition, investigators found alprazolam prescribed to Melissa, the same substance that had been detected in Sandra's system. Expanding the search to the church, they discovered a rolling pin with a bent handle and a faint blood stain on it, a stain later confirmed to contain Sandra's DNA, and it was believed to be an object involved in the assault. They also noted that a section of cord from a set of curtains was missing, and experts concluded it matched the cord used to secure the suitcase. On April 10, 2009, Melissa was brought in for questioning once again. She repeated her original story, but this time detectives had a clear chain of evidence, and when confronted directly, she could no longer maintain her composure, breaking down and bursting into tears.
Between 5:30 and 5:40, two people saw your car stopped on Whitehall Road. They saw you come from out of the bushes on Whitehall Road, and someone asked you what?
Well, I was okay, and I said I was going to the bathroom.
Mm-hmm. What were you doing? What was that?
In a state of emotional collapse, through uncontrollable sobs, Melissa began to change her account, saying it had all been an accident. I can't live with myself. I deserve to die. I didn't mean for it to happen. She just suddenly didn't make it.
It was an accident.
I told you it was an accident. I know it was. Accidents happen.
Kill her. I went to church. I was there. And when I came outside, there was a suitcase. I went to pick it out and it was heavy. And she was in there. She wasn't breathing or anything.
What did she look like?
She looked pale. I killed her. I thought that she was dead. And I panicked.
So what happened?
I tried to wake her up and she wouldn't wake up. And I didn't know what else to do.
Melissa went on to say that Sandra had seen her as she was preparing to get into her car near the house, which was why the girl turned back down the street and approached to say hello, then noticed the suitcase in the back seat. According to her, Sandra climbed into the suitcase on her own as part of a game of hide and seek without her realizing it, and everything quickly spiraled out of control. She claimed that it was only after she drove to the church and lifted the suitcase out that she discovered Sandra inside in critical condition, and although she tried to help, she understood that nothing could be done, and in a state of panic, she took the victim to the canal area to conceal what had happened. Plus, when detectives examined the body, Sandra's position indicated that it was not something a child could have done on her own, and forensic results confirmed the presence of a sedative and signs of a severe assault, which completely contradicted the explanation of an accident. The moment Melissa stopped speaking, she was taken into custody. Melissa Huckabee was later charged with multiple serious offenses related to Sandra's case, as well as acts involving other victims prior to this. Investigators believe that Sandra had trusted Melissa and felt no suspicion when she was called over to the vehicle, possibly under a familiar pretense such as helping at the church. From there, the entire sequence of events is believed to have taken place in a private setting, where Sandra was left unable to protect herself before being placed inside the suitcase. Throughout the time the community was desperately searching, Melissa continued to present herself as someone helping, from reporting her suitcase missing, to texting the family, to handing over the note, all of it forming a layer of misdirection she carefully constructed. Melissa initially pleaded not guilty, and her legal team focused on emphasizing her mental health condition, arguing that she was dealing with serious psychological issues and was not in a stable state of mind. They pointed to her troubled past as a contributing factor, suggesting that negative experiences had built up over time into long-standing psychological struggles that had never been properly treated. During her time in custody, Melissa also showed signs of a mental health crisis and had to be placed under special supervision. Her family, especially her parents, appeared shocked and unable to believe that their daughter could be involved in something like this, as they had never seen her display any signs of negativity or loss of control. In court, Melissa's mother, Judy, delivered an emotional apology to Maria. "I have felt your pain, and I understand the anger you must be feeling. From one mother to another, I am deeply sorry. Every time I sit in this courtroom, I place myself in your position, and I feel your pain. If I could bring you justice, the justice you deserve, it would be to have your little girl in your arms right now." Faced with the weight of the evidence the prosecution was preparing to present, Melissa ultimately changed her defense strategy and accepted responsibility for the main charges related to Sandra's death. As part of a legal agreement, several other charges were dropped, and this decision allowed her to avoid the most severe penalty under the law.
It is not enough that I say I'm sorry, but that is all I can do. From the day Sandra has died, I've had to live with the consequences of what I've done. For the rest of my life, I'm going to have to live with these feelings. I loved Sandra a great deal. She was a sweet, innocent little girl who did not deserve to have such a short life. I alone are responsible for Sandra's death. I would like to apologize directly to you, Maria, for all of the pain that I've caused. I should not have taken Sandra from you, and I want you to know that she did not suffer, and I did not sexually molest your daughter. I would also like to apologize to my own daughter, whom I've lost. I hope that someday you will forgive me. I love you a great deal, and I hope to see you again someday soon. I owe an apology to the people of Tracy, the police officers who spent so much time looking for Sandra. I know in my heart that God has forgiven me, and I know my family has forgiven me, and I'm asking you, Maria, for your forgiveness. I can't imagine forgiving somebody who would harm my own daughter, but I hope that someday you can forgive me. Maria, I wish I could give you an explanation for what happened. I owe you an explanation. But I still cannot understand why I did what I did. Every day, I try to discover my motivation, but I still do not have an answer. This is a question I will struggle with for the rest of my life. And I hope that this apology will help you in some way by accepting responsibility for what I have done. I hope that I can give you some peace.
However, the prosecution emphasized that based on the injuries documented by Dr. Amali, along with the nature of the object involved, they could not agree with the claim that Sandra had not experienced pain. and this reality made the entire courtroom feel even heavier. In court, Sandra's father, Daniel, faced Melissa directly and delivered an emotional statement.
You took the life of an innocent little girl, and she didn't do nothing. She's not even old enough to decide to eat ice cream yet. And nothing changes, and nothing's gonna change the fact whether I cry. Ain't nothing you do in life ever gonna change anything.
Mr. Cantu, I need you to address your comments to me.
She changed the lives of a lot of people. All I can say right now is repent and think about what you've done. I'm sorry.
On June 14, 2010, Melissa Huckabee faced a sentencing range of 25 years to life, but the judge imposed the maximum penalty, life in prison without the possibility of parole. To this day, she has never fully explained what happened or the true motive behind her actions. According to the prosecution, Melissa had previously shown multiple signs of instability, including instances of self-harm, creating incidents, and displaying negative behavior in her interactions. And they believed that some of these actions reflected a need for attention. She is currently serving her sentence at the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla.
It would have been murder victim Sandra Cantu's 9th birthday. Her family and friends gathered to remember her short life and to honor those who had tried to save her.
KCRA3's Damani Lewis is live for us in Tracy with more on this painful birthday observance.
You can see there's a happy birthday balloon here on this tree, as well as several flowers at the base of this tree that was dedicated to Sandra Cantu. People in attendance called the service a celebration of life for Sandra. A fitting opening song.
She's a beautiful girl.
For a mother who has needed a family and community to lean on through difficult times.
Yeah, there's a lot more people than what I thought.
Overwhelmed by the amount of support, Maria Chavez, mother of 8-year-old Sandra Cantu, found herself engulfed by friends and strangers alike, all here in support of what would have been the 9th birthday of Tracy's angel. For many here, they choose not to focus on the pain of the past.
That Friday afternoon, Sandra stepped out of her home with light footsteps after a joyful day at school, excited to meet her friends and enjoy the freedom of the weekend. No one could have imagined that everything would take such a haunting turn. And what makes this story even heavier is that it all happened at the hands of someone she and her family had once completely trusted. Near the school Sandra loved, the Tracy community came together to create a memorial space in her honor, with a tree planted alongside pink flowers, a small playground, and an area known as Sandra's Little House. To many, Sandra was not just a child who lived in the neighborhood. She was like the community's own daughter, a familiar face who brought joy every single day. When she disappeared, the entire neighborhood seemed to fall silent. And as Thomas shared, their family did not just lose a loved one. They lost the future they had once dreamed of watching grow day by day. Thank you for staying with this story today. And if you want to help share this message, please share the video, leave a comment in memory of Sandra, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you can continue following along with more stories like this. I'll see you in the next video.